GM, good morning. Welcome to the Milk Road Show, the daily crypto show where the fear of missing out is real, but missing out feels way worse. I'm your host, Jay Hamilton. It's Monday, May the 26th. Happy Memorial Day to all the Americans listening in. Happy Bitcoin week to everyone about to get on a flight to Vegas. Speaking of Bitcoin, everybody wants to buy Bitcoin. Last week, Strategy acquired over 4,000 Bitcoin. You heard that right, 4,000 Bitcoin. Today, we're joined by the one and only Scott Melker. Scott's a longtime crypto investor, just one of the best educators in the space. He's the wolf of all streets. You guys know him as. We're going to talk about Bitcoin treasury companies buying. We're going to talk about We're going to talk about corporations buying Bitcoin. What's the difference here? What's the outlook? What's the risk? We're also going to talk about macro. What actually matters in macro? Where's the signal amongst the noise? Altcoin season. Are we going to get an altcoin season? Is it now? Is it later? How is the rest of the cycle going to play out? We're going to answer all the questions that I know you guys got. Before we jump in, if you guys are swapping, check out Milk Road Swap. Why? Because we have some of the lowest fees in the space. We did not build Milk Road Swap to make money. We built it as a low fee place where you can trade whatever you want to trade on Ethereum and Solana all in one place. So check it out. Link in the description. Also, today's episode is brought to you by Ledn. Get cash without selling your Bitcoin. It's brought to you by Coinshift, powering top crypto treasuries with their yield-bearing stablecoin, CSUSDL. Without further ado, from the back of his car on his way to Bitcoin Vegas, Scott Melker. What's going on, my man?
A lot of traffic and a huge wreck and a closed highway, so probably not on my way to Bitcoin Vegas, it would appear.
Starting off the trip well. That's what we like to hear. Well, Scott,
It's great.
we got to say
2 minutes, 2 miles onto the highway, and here we are.
You huge thanks for joining us today. We had a last minute cancellation, so that's why Scott's in the back of his car, because he was willing to jump in last minute. Okay, Scott, last time we had you on the show was actually, I don't know if you remember, it was January 21st. Trump had just been inaugurated. Bitcoin was at 106,000. We were all bullish. The vibes were high. And here we are 4 months later. We're barely above 106K. If anybody had just taken the last 4 months off, you would have been in a great position. You would have missed a lot of noise and a lot of stress. Give us if you're talking to a buddy pulled up at a bar, how are you describing the setup right now? What's standing out to you most when you look at crypto right now? What matters to you most in your portfolio and your assets?
Yeah, I think if you're looking at crypto in general right now, and hopefully I have a decent signal here, you're looking at Bitcoin, right? I'm not saying you're not looking at other things, but Bitcoin is clearly in the driver's seat right now. It's got the institutional stamp of approval, it's got the government stamp of approval, it's got the ETFs, it's got companies buying. I mean, across the board, as you kind of mentioned in the intro, everybody wants to buy Bitcoin right now. I think that it's still an element of dart throwing when it comes to altcoins and the rest of the market. Still trying to figure out what's going on there. I do think that that will have its time, but right now it's hard not to be focused on Bitcoin, especially if you've been here for previous cycles. You see it starting to push towards an all-time high once again. That brings the liquidity and the volume in. It brings all the eyeballs. It brings the headlines. So I'm really waiting to see what Bitcoin does next to sort of judge everything else. I don't think it's particularly tied to macro at all. I mean, I think it is at moments, obviously, like yesterday you got the tariff, pause news, which was nonsensical at this point, anyways, and totally priced in that Trump is just going to tweet things. But and you got this quick move, but it bounced right back. And I think that you get these quick reactions because now we do have TradFi and other money in the market. But generally, I think Bitcoin has been kind of traveling its own path. I would have said that's the case indefinitely, but more glaringly now.
Yeah, it certainly feels like I almost hate to say it out loud, the decoupling, because every time we say Bitcoin is decoupling, it seems to not decouple again. But it feels like we're getting momentum in that direction. And just to quickly mention for everybody who missed it, Trump announced 50% tariffs on the EU, and then he paused 50% tariffs on the EU until July 9th. That's what Scott is referring to from the macro side, which, as he said, you try to predict what Trump's going to do next and deal with that headline risk. But before we talk about macro, let's talk about who's buying Bitcoin right now. When you look at, because there is one category that I know you spoke about on your show this morning, your Macro Monday shows, about the category that is most buying Bitcoin. Who is buying? And let's talk about that category and break that down.
Yeah. it's corporates, and you can't even keep up with the announcements at this point. So the Bitcoin to the treasury trend that we were looking for in 2020, 2021, when MicroStrategy first bought Bitcoin, and then we saw Tesla and and Square, follow in their footsteps. That didn't happen, right? So at that point, we saw Saylor have a meeting of 2,000 CFOs and all these companies. Every company in the world was supposed to add Bitcoin to the balance sheet. Microsoft and Apple, we had conjecture of the biggest money coming in. That didn't happen. So a lot of people kind of asked why at that point. It was largely gap accounting rules, which was that you basically had to mark your Bitcoin to the lowest point it traded in the entire quarter and then use that to basically crush your earnings. So nobody in their right mind would put Bitcoin in the balance sheet with those accounting rules, but those have changed over the past, I think, 6 months ago or so. They changed those laws. And now with, I think, the tailwinds of Bitcoin and an ETF existing this time and all of those things, I think there's a lot more creative ways for people to add Bitcoin to their balance sheets. And I think that's largely what we're seeing in this case. But we get an announcement every day of some company you've never heard of in some country officially putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet, public, private. Otherwise, there was a food company today that I think bought 21 Bitcoin, but is committed to buying 5,000. These are not financial companies. They have nothing to do with this. They're not trying to do what strategy does and become Bitcoin banks. They're just hedging against their cash position, losing value. I think there's a perfect storm right now, the sort of mixed sentiment on inflation, but I don't think anyone is of the belief at this point in time that the United States government is going to be fiscally responsible and stop printing money. And for the last couple of months, people thought there was an off chance that the United States government might become fiscally responsible and stop printing money because of Doge. And now you have even Elon Musk saying, yeah, that was never going to happen. We're going to go ahead and grow our way out of this. And so I think when you see even the Trump administration that had this sort of early austerity mindset and tariffs and the External Revenue Service throwing their hands in the air and Bessent going on TV and saying, yeah, we just got to grow, 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 like forget it. We can't even try to pay it off, buy Bitcoin, right? And I think that these are just the kind of signals that put more companies into it. Now we can talk about the different kinds of companies and different ways they're buying Bitcoin, because I think that's interesting and I have some serious concerns about it. But I think right now we are being corporately led.
Yeah, let's talk exactly about that. You and I were talking quickly before we recorded about there's two main types of companies that are buying Bitcoin, right? There's the corporations who are using it as basically an investment vehicle. These are corporations, as you say, they are profitable, they have other means of business. Their business has nothing to do with them buying Bitcoin and putting it on their balance sheet. But then there are the strategies of the world and the businesses that are buying Bitcoin and using it as a way to raise capital and to grow the value of their business. And we are seeing many more of those. I mean, predictions are there's lots of talk about more of those coming, but predictions are we're going to see 10 more of those be public in the next year or two. Okay, when you look at the difference, where does your mind go to, and where's the risk here? Because there is some systemic risk on one of these ends.
Yeah, I love what MicroStrategy is doing because he has such a big lead, such a huge position, and he was the first mover, Michael Saylor. So I don't have much fear about strategy blowing up. I think structurally they've done this the right way. And then you saw 21, obviously, Jack Mallers, SoftBank, Cantor Fitzgerald, Tether. Okay, I think that those are all very smart people who probably understand exactly what we're doing. Third, Nakamoto, David Bailey of the Bitcoin Conference and Bitcoin Magazine, and his team. I think they're probably well established, know what they're doing. My concern is that all of these companies are raising debt, effectively taking on a form of leverage to buy Bitcoin and doing nothing else, right? So there's no underlying business strategy. At least still has their software business that kind of brings some underlying income and supports a lot of their expenses. So I'm not necessarily concerned when there's three, but as you said, if 10 more come on and price is higher, and what we're going to start to see, because let's be honest, like these companies at their heart are hedge funds LARPing as like Bitcoin holding companies. Like it requires active management. There's got to be someone in there buying this Bitcoin, someone who deeply understands the debt, where liquidations would happen. This is not easy. This is financial engineering, right? And so my fear is much like it's not comparable in structure to a Voyager or Celsius or Vault or BlockFi or all of these, but this structural fear that if price goes to a certain point and one or two of these are forced to sell, it causes that same sort of cascade and systemic risk and pushes Bitcoin down. So I think this is probably the next bubble, but I don't think that this is the top of the bubble. I think this is the situation where Bitcoin draws down 30%, and instead of a simple 30% shallow retracement, we get 50 or 60% because that's when they're triggered and it pushes all of these sellers into the market. I can't say that's definitely going to happen, but I can tell you that if Bitcoin's at like 150 and that's the market top, I don't know. I'm just throwing round numbers. I'm not saying that's my prediction, but we saw it with miners last cycle. When Bitcoin got the most expensive, when there was the most FOMO, when there was the most hype, that's when the miners bought all their equipment for the next cycle at literally the dead top price. And by the time they were able to put it on, Bitcoin was at the lowest price and they blew up. Right. So what happens when these companies who, have a price, basically a liquidation price 30% below all-time high, which we've seen. I mean, we saw Bitcoin go from 65 to 29 in the summer of 21 in what, a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, I mean, something like that. That happens and they're all forced to sell off, and then you get this massive sell-off. So that's really my concern. I don't think that we need a lot of companies financially engineering markets to buy Bitcoin, and now we're seeing miners even do that when their core business has nothing to do with that. So just a lot of head scratching activity I see in the market.
Selling your Bitcoin should be a last resort when you need cash. That's why there's Ledn, the trusted platform for Bitcoin-backed loans. You can unlock cash in as little as 18 hours with no monthly interest payments and no prepayment penalties. They've issued over $9 billion in loans and never lost a single Satoshi of client funds, even during the chaos of 2022. If you're a long-term hodler, this is the move. Get liquidity without selling at milkroad.com/Ledn, spelled Ledn. Meet CSUSDL, the stablecoin built for institutions and DAOs. Don't just hold basic stablecoins, earn yield, all without compromising security, backed by regulated real-world assets and secured with institutional-grade risk management by our friends at Steakhouse Financial. Put your treasury cash to work, earning native yield and protocol rewards. Built by the team behind Coinshift, which is trusted to manage over $1 billion in business treasuries on-chain, including Aave, Gitcoin, and hundreds of leading institutions. CYCS USDL is gaining traction at milkroad.com/Coinshift. How many of these? I don't even know what to categorize these Bitcoin companies. How many of them actually have meaningful Bitcoin now? Do any of them yet, or is it still to come? Have any of them started? Like, has 21 even started buying yet? Do you know?
I saw 21, the Jack Mahler's led. They bought 400 million worth 2 weeks ago or something. I don't want to be quoted on that, but a few hundred million. But I think that they had a certain level of seeding from SoftBank, Tether, and Cantor Fitzgerald. So it was over $1 billion worth, because the big news there was that SoftBank was contributing massively and nobody knew that SoftBank had Bitcoin. That meant they either had it already and hadn't told anyone, or they were going to have to buy it to contribute. So that was kind of the hidden signal in that noise, I think. But yeah, I think that they're all starting to get it now. So listen, if price goes up massively, which I think it will with time, these guys who are early, I think they're going to be fine. They're going to do exceptionally well. They're going to make a ton of money. It's the ones who are inevitably going to jump on the trend at the top, like in any other market, that are going to hurt themselves and probably us.
Take us all down with them. No, they won't take us all down, but they will cause. I mean, it is a good point, because we talk about how as the returns on the way up of Bitcoin diminish, so does the downside. And as people start to treat Bitcoin more like a true risk-off asset, you would think that it should act more like that. But what you're saying is we might not still be there yet. Like, we might still have a few more years before we get there. One thing that was interesting to see was you put out this morning that BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF has 0 outflows in 30 days. Does that say to you that Bitcoin is decoupling and being treated as a different asset than its typical risk-on asset?
I think there's a few things to parse there. So if you've listened to me for years, I've always said that it's decoupled and is a risk-off asset, kind of trades on its own. It's neither gold and it's not a tech stock. And If it was, it would trade like both of those directly, and it just never does. It goes back and forth. I think it's a disservice sort of to compare it to either as far as price action. So that said, I mean, since Liberation Days, it's shown ridiculous strength, right? It basically had that quick wick down into the 70s, but it started before Liberation Day at 82. It was immediately back to 82. And all stocks have had this kind of V-shaped recovery and climb back to where they started. Bitcoin's 25-30% above that, right? So it's clear that it's performed way better than I or stocks.
This is what happens when we do an interview from the car. Oh no, Scott's gone. Okay. Hang with us, everybody. We'll get Scott back. This is what happens when you go live in a last minute call with somebody who's in a car as you're trying to pull your show together. But we appreciate you all hanging out with us. The other thing that just while we wait for Scott to come back on, the other things that really stand out to me is we are really we are seeing different behavior with the people that are buying Bitcoin, and that is very clear. And that's what Scott was just discussing, is there is different types of buyers to Bitcoin than than there's ever been in the past. And there's a really growing trend of the types of buyers that are buying Bitcoin from the risk off side. Oh, here he is. Scott's back. We didn't quite hear your thoughts on Bitcoin decoupling. I heard the first part. We know your background and that you've always believed that it's decoupling, and it has neither traded as risk on or risk off. It's kind of been this hybrid that's been in between. But we didn't hear the rest of your thoughts there.
Yeah, so that was a good summary. I kept rambling on to a black screen for far too long, clearly. So obviously, since Liberation Day, we've seen it wildly outperform. So I think that not only the true believers said, "See, I told you so." I think a lot more people took notice when, obviously Bitcoin was about 82,000 before Liberation Day. It wicked down to about 74, but basically was trading right back at 82. We've had this long V-shaped recovery on stocks, and Bitcoin's now trading like 30% higher. So it behaved like basically this incredible hedge fund that capped your downside, but then outperformed wildly to the upside. And we had these days recently, and like I said, no surprise to me, but where, the NASDAQ or stocks are down 2-3% and Bitcoin's up big. And so if you're a portfolio manager and you've started looking at these things, yeah, you go, wow, this thing maybe is really outperforming, because people have recency bias. They need to see it, to believe it on any given day. But specifically to the BlackRock ETF, I think was the original question with IBIT. So I think you have this sort of bid underneath it from retail and institutions that just want to add Bitcoin. They're dollar cost averaging, they're passively buying it, on a schedule at this point, and they're choosing IBIT because it's the biggest, it's the most notable name, people trust BlackRock. And to some degree now, you have to remember that has options on it. So there's a lot more you can do with a BlackRock spot ETF that you can't necessarily do with other products, including maybe spot Bitcoin for a lot of people. So I think that that's part of the story, and the carry trade has returned in a big way. So there's about a 9.5% yield, passive yield, that you can earn by simply shorting Bitcoin futures in contango and buying spot Bitcoin. But for institutions, they're doing that with the BlackRock ETF instead of buying spot Bitcoin like they would have in the past. Like we saw this with Grayscale when it was at a premium in the past, right? GBTC was at 30% premium, and you had this contango, but you were buying spot Bitcoin. Well, now they buy ETFs because it's easier. So as long as that carry trade exists, and by the way, when we saw that record outflows a month and a half or 2 months ago, it was because that carry trade was down to 3 or 4%, and so it was unwinding, right? And so people have, when it unwinds, you sell the underlying spot to get out of the trade. Doesn't mean they're losing money; they're just the trade's not worth it. You go buy treasuries, right? So you have to once we're institutionalized, you have to realize now we're trading like hedge funds and being hedged like normal companies and all these crazy things. They're going to use the IBIT BlackRock spot ETF for that.
Okay, so institutions are here, they're buying, but the inflows feel early stage. It's not euphoric stage yet with institutions, which would say to me, we've got room to go in this cycle. And then you mentioned retail. Retail isn't really buying right now. It doesn't really feel like this is retail led right now. What's your thought on retail?
I think everybody's buying to some degree. I think a lot of the signals people use to see if retail is here or not are bogus at this point. Like people always keep referencing Google searches for Bitcoin, but like who doesn't know what Bitcoin is anymore? Of course, there's less Google searches in 2025 than there are in 2021. right? Because it's become a mainstream asset. It's on every ticker. It's on Fox Business. It's on CNBC. People know what Bitcoin is. Like if you're Googling what is Bitcoin, there's going to be far less people doing that in 2025. That's been one of the signals I continually see people looking at. And I don't buy that. So I think that there is a lot of buying because all of this, if you take a look at the derivatives markets and such, it's been spot driven. There's been a Coinbase premium to some degree, but like this is people buying actual Bitcoin and not selling it. In the past, when you get that overheated market that you kind of mentioned, you have derivatives, perpetual swaps on the Bybits and used to be BitMEX and Binance with a huge funding rate. So like you're paying this massive premium to be long. And that is not happening here. Like those rates are effectively flat, like astoundingly flat. I think right now to be long is like 4 to 5% annualized with a rate that basically recalculates every 8 hours. That's insane. I think at the peak of the bear market, you could be over 100%, 80%, 85% annualized just for the right to be long. And you're paying the shorts. So there's no evidence of leverage froth, at least on the retail side. So I think that they're buying. I think it just doesn't have as much of an impact when you don't see the crazy volatility in the derivatives market.
So let's talk outlook for Bitcoin. The thing I can't figure out right now is what happens over the next few months. I I feel good, and I think you would likely agree with me, although correct me if I'm wrong, that we are still in a bull cycle and that we finish the year. I don't know what your prediction is, but like everyone seems to be somewhere between 150 to 250 end of cycle, whether that's the end of 2025 or whether that goes into 2026, up for debate. So tell me your thoughts on that. But more so, I would love your thoughts on the short term, the summer, because typically we get summer, go away, sell in May, go away, take a break. Doesn't necessarily feel like that same thing's going to happen this time around.
It doesn't, but it didn't feel that way in May of 2021 either, right before China turned off banning and Elon Musk said you like couldn't buy Teslas with Bitcoin anymore. And Bitcoin, as I said, went from 65 to 29 before going back to 69. People look back on 2021 correctly as this crazy bullish year. Altcoins went nuts. Bitcoin hit a new all-time high. They forget how miserable that summer was. And we didn't just go to 29. We like stayed down in the 30s all summer. And so, did that mean it's going to repeat? No, but if you believe in the 4-year cycle, even that most bullish year of the 4-year cycle had that crazy 50% plus drawdown, and stayed there and shook people out to believe that it was over. So that wouldn't surprise me. I'm not saying I don't think we go that low, but like if we spent the summer in the 80s or something, not surprise me for 1 second. It's not my prediction, but it wouldn't surprise me for 1 second. That said, it also wouldn't surprise me if we were sitting at 130 all summer. I think that we're really at an inflection point right now where I can see like the argument that there's all these top signals and we could go down, but I can also see that argument as these are just the first catalysts and they're very legitimate, right? I mean, we had the conversation on Macro Monday this morning. I flat out asked that question to Dave Weisberger and Mike McGlone because of their long experience. Mike was basically saying these are top signals when all these companies start coming in. And I said, well, how do you differentiate between a top signal if these companies are coming in? What if 500 more follow? It's not a top signal that's going to drive price. So how do you tell if these are top signals or if they're just the very early catalysts of a huge wave? And so right now, I think we're at an inflection point where I could see the argument for either of those, right? So we're going to have to kind of see if we get the follow through that we were hoping for in like a 2021 that didn't happen, as we talked about before. I think we will. I think we're really early in this trend. That said, I'm always shocked at no matter how bullish things are, that there is just some whales that can sell so much Bitcoin and send price down that blows my mind. Every time we say, oh, where are the sellers? Where are they even getting this? There's no sellers. Don't underestimate how much Bitcoin is out there and how high of a price this is for some people who bought it sub $1 or lower, so it's pretty
Totally.
crazy. Short term, I think we're going to test these highs. I think we're a few percent under the all-time high. You got to think you're going to test that. But, a lot of things seem to have gotten a bit overheated. So maybe we kind of chill for a while. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw sort of a sideways summer here in this area, maybe range between 100 and 120 all summer. And time-based capitulation happens to people where they just get bored. You don't necessarily need price to go down for people to stop believing. You just need to stop going up for a while where they start to just, get bored and give up and sell. So I I don't really have a high conviction in a specific price in the short term. I do think even if we have a bad summer, that we end the year very high, kind of to your point, like 150 plus.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and would you agree? Let's shift to altcoins here. Are we still in Bitcoin season, or is altcoin season? Everyone loves calling altcoin season, right? Everybody loves calling it. And when altcoins have a rip like they did recently, not all altcoins, let me mention, but a lot of altcoins are doing well and coming back, although they were down so bad that this might just be mean reversion. Uh, do you think we get an two questions? Do you think we get an altcoin season, and when? Is that a now thing, or is it still Bitcoin's world for the next while and then altcoin season comes later?
To your point, I think we just had a little altcoin season. People also
Mhm.
forget from the past that these altcoin seasons tend to be very short and explosive, right? So maybe that was the version that we get in 2025. So when Ethereum went back to 2018 levels and hit 1,400 bucks, I bought a lot of Ethereum and was pretty much screaming from the mountaintops, and people were not happy about it. And I said, listen, this is gonna, even if it's just a technical bounce, Ethereum will bounce, it'll go up, and when Ethereum goes up, all this stuff that hasn't moved will go up, right? And so what we ended up with was this magical unicorn moment where not only did Bitcoin rise, but Bitcoin dominance went down. And we have not seen that in years. So we've seen these little altcoin moves. We've seen these little moves down in Bitcoin dominance, maybe when Bitcoin is sideways or something. It's been a very long time since we saw what we did recently, which is when Bitcoin pushed from the mid 90s back up into the hundreds. We saw altcoins outperform that on the way up as much, Ethereum going up as much as I think 40% in 2 days, right? So that's a signal to me for multiple reasons. A, because we just hadn't seen it kind of structurally happen. But B, because if Bitcoin's also going up and every altcoin effectively went up, there has to be new money in the market. That's not the old washing machine of Bitcoin being sold for liquidity to buy altcoins, which we've seen so many times in the past. There had to be new money if everything's going up. There's more buying than selling. So something's not being sold off to buy something else. So that gave me hope that people are paying attention now again to altcoins, and they're kind of just waiting for the moment to pour back in. So I think that we saw the first iterations of altcoin season. That said, there's just absolutely no way everything can go up. Like there is not enough money in
That's
the
my
market
next
at this
question.
point to
Like, yeah,
send
what?
to send every altcoin, right? And I'll tell you this, I don't know like if you see kind of what's happening behind the scenes. I happen to like get sent deal flow and I talk to VCs and all this stuff. There's got to be 10,000 hyped. They're like waiting for the perfect market conditions to launch. When that news that comes on the market, in addition to all these altcoins that people are praying will go up. So you're gonna have to catch the narratives, you're gonna have to be in and out of them. Like it's gonna be required to really study knowledge and trading sense to make in altcoins.
Oh, we're losing Scott again here, folks. I know he's saying that, and I can confirm what he's saying. Scott, I think you're back with us, but I can confirm exactly what you're saying, which is that there is so many projects and tokens waiting on the sidelines right now that are waiting to launch and waiting for the market conditions to be right. And these are new tokens that are going to flood the market or are going to take away capital. Like there's just so much capital dispersion that is it even possible to get an altcoin season again like we've got in the past? No, it is not. So it will not be throw a dart at a dartboard and pick any altcoin and every single altcoin goes up. It'll be certain sectors will get it'll be the narrative driven. Altcoin season is so narrative driven. So it'll be meme coins. I could see it being AI. I could see it being DeFi. I could see it even being certain sectors within DeFi. Maybe it's only Solana DeFi, or maybe it's only Ethereum DeFi. Not to make it difficult for everybody listening to say that there's too many options, quite frankly, but that is the case. And that's why investing is so difficult. And so it's going to be one of those cases where as we lead into an altcoin season, which I do think we will get, and I know Scott believes it as well. It's going to be short, it's going to be fast, and you should really only be in it if you're in it on a regular basis, if you're in it daily. Do not, it is very, very difficult to invest in altcoins. Let me put it that way. It is very difficult to have a long strategy in altcoins. You more so need to be regularly tuned in order to be in altcoins. Otherwise, yeah, you'll just miss it on the way down, and you'll round trip it, or you'll buy at the top. The other news that came out today was the Dubai Land Department has chosen XRP to power their real estate tokenization project. Very interesting to see XRP getting a large contract. I mean, this is the thing that XRP has always said that they would do, is they would be able to get these large government contracts, which if they can do that, that could prove their worth. Look, I'm not invested in XRP. I've always sat on the sidelines of it because I've never understood the fundamental side of XRP, and its market cap is just so insanely high in comparison to its fundamentals that it really I have a tough time wrapping my head around it. But the XRP army is real, and there is real government involvement in blockchain in right now and coming very fast, especially, I mean, not just in Dubai, but especially in the US, as this regulation comes in and as the legislation comes in. So you can bet there's some big opportunities for somebody like an XRP to possibly get some major contracts, which could be the springboard that they need to have their own rip and their own season. Okay, I think we've lost Scott, but we'll wrap up there. I appreciate you guys all tuning in today and dealing with us. Well, Scott was in the car. It was a little bit of a messy episode, but hey, that's what happens sometimes in life when you're trying to get yourself to Vegas for Vegas, Bitcoin Vegas. Anybody who's headed there, have an awesome week. If anybody's headed there and they want to come on the show and give a update, would love to have somebody on the show. So if there's anybody going to Vegas, you want to come on the show later this week to give us the on the ground. I unfortunately will not be in Bitcoin Vegas, but I will be sending everybody lots of love from the distance. For everybody listening, I got to remind you, none of today's episode was financial advice. Everything that we said is for entertainment and educational purposes only. You should only invest what you're prepared to lose, and you should always take the time to do your own research and think about your investments. With that said, if you need help with any of your research, you should subscribe to the Milk Road newsletter. Hit the link in the show notes. 5 minutes per day in your inbox. It'll give you investment advice, and it'll make you laugh, which is really what we all want. Thanks again for tuning in, everybody. Have a wicked awesome day. We'll see you back again tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in, y'all. Before I let you go, I got to tell you, our friends over at Gemini are doing a super cool contest right now. They're giving away 2 Tesla Cybertrucks. It's called the Cyber Beast Edition, and it is a custom Cybertruck wrapped in a custom Bitcoin design. It looks freaking awesome. Basically, all you got to do to get an entry in order to win these Cybertrucks is use your Gemini credit card or trade on Gemini Exchange. For every $50 you spend on your credit card or you trade on the exchange, you get 1 entry. So check it out. It goes until June 18th. It's open to US residents 18 and older. So sorry to everyone else around the world. But if you're in the US and you want to get a chance to win a sweet Tesla Cybertruck, check out the link in the show notes. Spend your money on your Gemini credit card or trade on their exchange, and you could win a Cybertruck. And if you win, I hope you come pick me up and give me a ride. All right. Thanks for listening, y'all. See you again tomorrow. Have a wicked awesome day. As always, if you liked today's episode, please hit subscribe and make sure you follow us so you don't miss out on the next one. There's also a link in the description to our free 5-minute daily newsletter where we simplify crypto for you while making you laugh. And if you're willing to step up your crypto investing game, we're going to also leave a link for Milk Road Pro. You get access to our portfolio where you can see exactly what we are buying. This is your #1 resource to help you invest successfully in crypto. One final note, this show is for educational purposes only, and nothing we say is financial advice. Investing in crypto or any asset is risky, and you should never invest more than you can afford to lose. Thanks so much for listening in, my friends. Have a wicked awesome day.